The moment my wife said, "We need to talk," I had no idea my entire life was about to collapse. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't going to just sit back and let her destroy everything. I was going to fight back. I picked up the phone with an impatient sigh, barely glancing away from my screen as I scrambled to finalize the latest design revisions. It was a typical Monday afternoon at the office. Clients had spent the weekend nitpicking through the plans, tossing in last-minute changes, and of course I was the lucky one stuck cleaning up the mess. "Hey," I greeted, distracted. "Hi," my wife Heather replied. There was something off in her voice, tight, almost strained, but I chalked it up to a stressful day on her end. "I was just calling to see what time you'll be home tonight." Heather was always on top of things. She was the planner in our family, the one who made sure everything ran smoothly. Checking in like this wasn't unusual for her. It was just part of how she kept our hectic schedules in sync. "I'm not sure," I muttered, still focused on manipulating the CD program in front of me. "Joe just handed me some last-minute changes to the Johnson project. We need to get everything to the contractor by tonight. If things go smoothly, I should be done in a couple of hours, but don't hold dinner for me. If it runs late, I'll have something brought in." Even as I spoke, I couldn't help but feel irritated. My boss had a habit of springing these unexpected late nights on me, and it had caused more than a few arguments between Heather and me over the years. I work as an architect for a firm specializing in large commercial developments. About 5 years ago, I got promoted to project manager, a step up in salary sure, but also a heavier workload and longer hours. Days like today were inevitable. When a rush job landed on my desk, I had no choice but to drop everything and make it happen. Any delays in getting plans to the builders could mean costly penalties for the firm, which in turn could mean bad news for my own bank account. Project managers who couldn't deliver didn't last long around here. The problem was these urgent projects rarely came with any warning. The last few years had been particularly rough. My team had built a reputation for handling high-pressure projects, which meant every demanding client that walked through our firm's doors now wanted us. Even when their requests were unreasonable, my boss expected us to deliver. Privately, he'd admit the clients were being ridiculous. Publicly, his message was clear: get it done. I suppose my boss was willing to tolerate my complaints because, at the end of the day, the firm was making a fortune off these high-maintenance clients. Every little inconvenience they threw at my team came with a hefty price tag, and since my team was handling the bulk of these projects, we were raking in impressive bonuses and earning a lot of respect. But the workload was wearing us down. I've always been the kind of guy who values family time. I want to be there for my kids, to be present in their lives, not just some guy they see in the mornings before school and on weekends when work allows. Just that week, I had finally put my foot down with my boss. I told him things had to change. The relentless overtime was starting to take a toll on my team's performance, and if we kept up this pace, I was going to start losing some of my best people. To my surprise, he didn't dismiss me outright. He reluctantly agreed, and we scheduled a meeting to discuss setting more reasonable deadlines. That's why I wasn't entirely sure why Heather seemed so upset about my hours. She put in long days at her job too, and I rarely, well, not too often, complained about it. She worked as a financial analyst, and I understood that sometimes long hours were just part of the deal. We both knew that the extra responsibility came with a bigger paycheck, and over the years, we had figured out how to balance work and family. At least I thought we had. But lately, her frustration had been growing. "I'm sure Heather will give you anything you want," she said, her voice laced with something I didn't pick up on at the time. Yeah. "I'll try to make it home before midnight," I muttered, barely registering her words. "We need to talk." I barely acknowledged that last part, rushing to get off the phone so I could refocus on my work. In hindsight, I can see it so clearly, her tone, the edge in her voice, the weight behind those words. But at the time, I was too distracted to give her my full attention. I just needed to get the job done. What I didn't realize was that, no matter how I had responded, my distracted tone had only confirmed what she already feared, that she wasn't my priority. And I knew how much she hated being ignored. All I managed to do in that moment was make her angrier. Looking back, I even missed the way she practically spat the name Heather. Heather had been working as my personal assistant for 3 years now, hired fresh out of college when I was putting my team together. Bringing her on was one of the best decisions I had made. She was sharp, organized, and had a knack for keeping things running smoothly. I relied on her constantly. She was always in and out of my office, keeping me on schedule, accompanying me to building sites, making sure nothing fell through the cracks. I spent a lot of time with Heather. But at the time, I didn't think much of it. I never really stopped to consider how things might have looked from her perspective. Maybe it wouldn't have been a problem under different circumstances, but the truth was, things had been tense between us for the past year or two. Somewhere along the way, we had both developed the unfortunate habit of avoiding difficult conversations. Instead of addressing issues head-on, we let them linger, ignored them, and hoped they would resolve themselves. They never did. Heather had never outright accused me of anything inappropriate. And as for me, I had no reason to doubt her. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but we had a solid partnership. We argued like any couple, but at the end of the day, I never questioned why we were together. It wasn't about money, we both had successful careers. We were together because we wanted to be. She was the woman I had always pictured growing old with. By the time I finally wrapped up the project and sent the revised blueprints off to the contractor, it was already past 8. I leaned back in my chair, stretching out the tension in my shoulders before shutting down my computer. As I walked out of the office with the last few team members, we all exchanged tired goodbyes, eager to get home and salvage what was left of the evening. When I stepped through the front door, Heather was already waiting for me. Her posture was stiff, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. There was something in her expression that sent a wave of unease through me, not quite anger but something close. "Bill," she said slowly, her voice carefully measured. "I don't know how to make this any easier, so I'm just going to say it." I felt a strange, sinking sensation in my chest as she took a deep breath. "I want a divorce." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there, stunned, struggling to process what I had just heard. "What?" The disbelief in my voice was unmistakable. "You can't be serious. What's going on?" She lowered her gaze, refusing to look me in the eye. I stared at her, my mind scrambling for answers. Had I missed something? Had I been so wrapped up in work that I failed to see our marriage falling apart? And then, almost instinctively, my thoughts went to the worst possible conclusion. "You're leaving me for someone else, aren't you?" I asked, my voice quieter now but filled with something raw. Her silence told me everything I needed to know. For a long moment I just sat there, numb. This wasn't the woman I thought I knew, the one I trusted, the one I built a life with. I had spent the last few minutes desperate to figure out how to fix things, how to make this right. But now, I wasn't sure if there was even anything left to save. Anger slowly began to creep in, burning away the initial shock. "Who is it?" I asked, my voice rough, unsteady. Heather swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, Bill," she said softly. "It just happened. It wasn't supposed to be anything." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Right. It just happened." The room suddenly felt too small, too suffocating. The weight of her betrayal settled on my chest like a boulder, making it impossible to breathe. I didn't know what came next. All I knew was that the life I thought I had, the life I had worked so hard to build, was already slipping away. I had two choices: let myself drown in the emotional torment of her betrayal or shut down completely. The pain was unbearable, a raw, searing wound that made it impossible to think clearly. If I wanted to function, if I wanted to survive this, I had to lock it all away. So I did. I forced myself to detach, to bury the anger and grief beneath an impenetrable shell of indifference. My voice was flat, my expression devoid of emotion as I met her gaze. "Fine. You want a divorce? You got it. Saves me the effort." Heather hesitated, like she hadn't expected me to give in so easily. There was something else, something I hadn't quite caught. "What did you just say?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. She let out an exasperated sigh, as if I was the one being unreasonable. "I said we need to figure out what we're going to do," she repeated, her tone measured. "I know I just dropped this on you, so I don't mind if you stay in the guest room for a few days while you find a place to live." I stared at her, stunned. The audacity. The sheer nerve. She cheats on me. She decides she wants out. And now she expects me to pack up and leave? My disbelief hardened into fury. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice low and sharp. "You think I'm just going to walk out of my own house so your boyfriend can move in? Do you really take me for an idiot?" Her silence was answer enough. I took a step closer, my words slow and deliberate. "If you want to run off with him, go ahead. There's the door. But the kids stay here, with me." Heather's eyes flickered with uncertainty, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her confidence. "You can visit them whenever you want," I continued, "and maybe, just maybe, you can explain to them why you destroyed this family." Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but she said nothing. I wasn't going to let some guy, some man who had already abandoned his own children, walk into my home and into my kids' lives. No, that was never going to happen. For all our problems, one thing had never changed: we were both good parents. And despite the storm raging between us, We could at least agree on one thing. We wouldn't drag the kids into our battlefield. Still, I couldn't stand to be near her any longer. If I stayed, I'd say something I couldn't take back. I exhaled sharply, pushing past her. We'll finish this later. And with that, I walked away from the woman I thought I knew, away from the life I thought we had, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. I walked over to Lacey and gently asked her to come upstairs with me so we could talk. If the girls were going to stay with me, they deserved to hear the truth, at least as much of it as I could give them. They needed to understand that their mother and I were facing problems we couldn't fix, and that we had decided to get a divorce. I tried my best to reassure them. I emphasized again and again that none of this was their fault. That their mother and I both loved them deeply, no matter what happened between us. But just as I had feared, the news hit them hard. It was a shock, one none of us had been prepared for. Lacey pressed me for answers, desperate to understand why. But what could I say? That their mother had found someone else? That she had chosen another man over our family? I couldn't do that to them. So, I simply shook my head, keeping my voice steady. I'm upset just like you, I said. And I don't have all the answers right now. When I went back downstairs, I caught a strange expression on Heather's face, something tense, uneasy. And then it hit me. She was afraid. Afraid that I had told the girls everything. That in a moment of anger, I had revealed her affair with Johnson and turned them against her. I let out a bitter breath, shaking my head in disgust. Jesus Christ, Heather. Give me some credit, I muttered. I might hate you right now, but you're still their mother. They need both of us. I would never try to turn them against you. For a moment, she just stood there, searching my face as if trying to figure out whether she could believe me. Then slowly she gave a small nod. Without another word, she turned and walked upstairs. At that point, I had no idea if she was planning to stay or leave, and honestly, I didn't care. A few minutes later, she reappeared, a small overnight bag slung over her shoulder. There was something sorrowful in her eyes, but I didn't have it in me to care about that either. I'll call the girls tomorrow, she said quietly. And I'll let you know when I'm coming by to pick up a few more things. I'm going to stay with a friend for a few days. I didn't respond. I just watched as she walked to the door, stepped outside, and disappeared into the night. I snorted, shaking my head. I had no doubt Heather was heading straight to someone's place. Maybe a friend's, maybe her boyfriend's. Either way, I assumed her next stop would be to seek recommendations for a tough, aggressive divorce attorney. By morning, the girls were surprised to find their mother gone. Confused, upset. But when I told them she had promised to call, they seemed somewhat reassured. I gave them my word that we would sit down and discuss everything after school. They wanted to stay home, and honestly, I couldn't blame them. But I knew I'd be tied up all day, and the last thing I wanted was for them to sit around the house, dwelling on the divorce. So I sent them off, hoping that a normal routine, if only for a few hours, might help. Later that day, I got an unexpected call. A mutual friend, Claire, had been keeping tabs on Heather and him, Alan Johnson, for the past few months. She had suspicions, and now she had proof. Photos, videos, everything. She told me she had been tracking them for weeks, and she had gathered a mountain of evidence, all of which she was eager to share. I didn't need to see it all. The few pictures she handed over, Heather and Johnson kissing, looking every bit like a couple, were enough to make my stomach churn. I refused to watch the videos, refused to let myself sink into the details. Seeing my wife betray me in real time? No. That was more than I could stomach. But something about it didn't add up. Alan Johnson. Of all people. I had never seen him as particularly manipulative or cruel, at least not in the way you'd expect from a guy who steals another man's wife. It made me wonder, had I ever really known Heather at all? Had I been blind to the person she had become? Either way, the evidence was right in front of me. And as I sat there, waiting for my daughters to come home, my mind was made up. If Heather was willing to throw away everything we built, our life, our family, so carelessly, then I had no reason to play fair. I would keep my promise to keep the girls out of it. But in every other aspect, it was going to be war. I was prepared for a messy, contested divorce, one where every single detail would be fought over, starting with custody of our daughters. That's when Laura stepped in. Laura was the one person who could change everything. Laura had always been my rock, the one person I could count on to give me the advice I needed, whether I wanted to hear it or not. Technically, she was my cousin. But that label didn't come close to describing our relationship. In our minds, we were twins, just with different mothers. To understand that, you'd have to know how we grew up. Our families were closer than most. We didn't just live next door to each other. Our parents practically merged both households into one big shared space. It was like having two homes and two sets of parents. Her mom and dad, Aunt Cindy and Uncle Bill, treated me like their own just as my parents did with Laura. Honestly, I think our moms even switched off nursing us as babies at times. I never questioned it. I considered myself lucky. I had two moms. And yes, before you ask, I was named after my uncle just like Laura was named after my mother. Growing up, Laura and I were inseparable. We had that unshakable twin dynamic. The kind where we could communicate with just a look, the kind where we knew each other better than anyone else ever could. We stuck up for each other through everything. If someone had a problem with one of us, they had a problem with both of us. I probably took more punches defending Laura than for any other reason, and she did the same for me. To this day, she is closer to me than my actual sister. She's my closest confidant, my voice of reason, and the first person I turn to when my world falls apart. So naturally, when everything with Heather imploded, Laura was the first person I called. She was furious on my behalf, outraged at Heather's betrayal. But while she shared my anger, she also balanced it out with perspective, something I wasn't getting from Joe, my boss. Joe had been urging me to go after Heather as aggressively as possible in the divorce, to hit her where it hurt. And for a while I listened. 3 weeks after Heather left, I had already hired the ruthless attorney Joe recommended. I had met with him several times, going over strategies, planning out the legal battle ahead. The goal was clear. I needed full custody of my daughters. My lawyer's approach was simple but brutal. He wanted to argue that Heather's ongoing relationship with Alan Johnson posed a risk to the kids. He also suggested claiming that by leaving the house, Heather had abandoned not just me but the girls as well. In other words, if I wanted any shot at winning custody, I had to go for the jugular. But that was the moment Laura stepped in. And what she said made me rethink everything. If I wanted to win full custody, I would have to destroy Heather's relationship with the girls. The fact that I didn't immediately reject the idea said everything about my state of mind at the time. I was angry, desperate, willing to do whatever it took to protect my daughters. But even as I sat in my lawyer's office, nodding along to his strategy, there was a nagging voice in the back of my mind telling me something about this felt wrong. So I told him I'd think about it. A few days later, I met Laura for lunch and in my usual gloomy fashion, filled her in on my lawyer's suggestions. I expected sympathy, maybe even agreement. Instead, Laura rolled her eyes and set down her fork with a sigh. "Look, Junior," she said, using the childhood nickname only she could get away with. "I've sat here for 3 weeks listening to you cry and moan about Heather and what she did to you. And yeah, it sucks. But it's time to grow up and get over it. Stop reacting. Start thinking." At first, I thought she was just teasing, trying to snap me out of my funk. But then I saw the serious look in her eyes. "Bill, I know you're angry. I know you're hurting. You have every right to be. I'm furious with Heather too," she admitted. "But for God's sake, when did you start letting the lawyers make your decisions for you? And what about the girls? How do you think a nasty divorce is going to affect them?" I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. Laura leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Tell me, how often does Joe get to see his kids?" I clenched my jaw and shook my head. Joe was lucky if he saw his son and daughter twice a year. He was always complaining about the roadblocks his ex threw up to make visitations impossible. Laura must have seen something flicker across my face because she pressed on, her voice softer now. "Do you want that to happen to you? Would you really want to do that to Heather, either? If you drag her through the mud in court, she's going to fight back just as hard. And in the end, the ones who really suffer will be the girls." She had my full attention now and she knew it. I had been wrestling with these same doubts ever since I left my lawyer's office, but hearing Laura say them out loud made them impossible to ignore. "So, what do you want me to do?" I muttered, rubbing a hand over my face. "Just give up? Let Heather have custody and hope she lets me see them? It's a no-win situation, Laura." She shook her head. "There is another choice. But your lawyer doesn't see it, because all he knows how to do is fight." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Shared custody, Bill," she said simply. I stared at her, my mind racing. Laura had given me a lot to think about, and I tried to steer the conversation onto something lighter. But she wasn't done meddling in my life just yet. As I reached for my drink, she dropped another bombshell. "Heather called the other day," she said. "Heather's worried about you. The girls are worried about you. Hell, even Ray is worried about you," Laura said, her tone edged with frustration. "When are you going to pull your head out of your ass and stop moping? You're getting divorced, so what? Deal with it." I sighed, rubbing my temples. Laura had never been the type to sugarcoat things, but she had a way of calling me out exactly when I needed it most. This wasn't the first time she had knocked some sense into me. When we were kids, she was the one who pushed me to stop wasting my time with people who didn't deserve it. Now here she was giving me life advice again. First, she had given me a much-needed reality check about my daughters and the divorce. Now she was trying to lecture me about love. What was next? Setting me up on blind dates? I must have made a face because she smirked knowingly. I figured that would get your attention, she said dryly. Look, you need to stop acting like your life is over. You have to see this as an opportunity. Do you know how many women our age are single at the club? Divorced, widowed? It's not like you're the only one starting over. How many guys do you know who had their wife walk out on them and now they're happier? I scoffed. Oh yeah, great opportunity. My wife decided to spread her legs for Alan Johnson. Real lucky break for me. Laura rolled her eyes. You're so full of it, she muttered. I let out a bitter laugh. Oh come on. I bet all your friends are getting a good laugh at my expense. The cucked idiot whose wife ran off with another man. Laura shook her head, this time in genuine exasperation. You stupid, stupid man. You are wrong in so many ways I don't even know where to begin. She sighed dramatically, then leaned forward, staring me down. All right, let's start with the thing that obviously seems to be bothering you the most, your pride. She gave me a pointed look. Is your ego really that fragile? Do you honestly believe everyone is sitting around laughing at you? That you're some kind of joke? Grow up, Bill. I frowned but said nothing. She wasn't done. The women who are going to be interested in you aren't sitting around tallying up who got dumped or who cheated on who. They care about this, she tapped her temple, and this, she pointed to her heart, a hell of a lot more than that. She smirked and motioned toward my crotch. I shook my head, half amused, half irritated. Thanks, Laura. Really appreciate the pep talk. She grinned. I love you, twin, but sometimes you can be dense. What do you really think women our age are looking for? You think they just want some quick fling? No. They want stability. They want someone real. You don't have to pretend to be anything you're not. I let out a long breath, feeling some of my anger start to loosen its grip. Then she hit me with the real kicker. And another thing, Heather is going to be miserable in a few years, Laura said, an evil little chuckle escaping her lips. That caught my attention. Oh. Think about it, she said, leaning forward. She was jealous and suspicious of you just for hiring a young assistant. How do you think she's going to handle a man she knows is a lying, cheating slimeball? It's only a matter of time before she realizes exactly what kind of mess she got herself into. That thought, I had to admit, perked me up a little. The girls will be sad, sure. But one day they'll know the truth, I muttered, shaking my head. They're young now, but eventually they'll understand what happened. Heather didn't just cheat on me, she cheated on the father of her daughters. She walked out on our family. I clenched my jaw. So yes, she deserves what's coming to her. And you know what? I'll make sure every single one of our family members and friends, on both sides, know exactly what she did. Laura sighed, giving me that look she always gave when she thought I was being stubborn. You said you'd end up hating her. But is that really what you want? To be consumed by it? Why shouldn't I hate her? I shot back. She cheated on me. Why should I show her any sympathy? Laura shook her head. You keep acting like this is just about getting revenge, Bill. But this is about the girls too. You need to think about what's best for them. I scoffed. Oh, so I'm just supposed to sit back and let her get away with it? I'm supposed to pretend everything's fine for the sake of diplomacy? I think, Laura said, her tone softer now, that you should at least talk to her. Not for her sake, but for the girls. You need to think about them first. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. Women, I muttered bitterly. Are they all this stupid? Or do I just have the worst luck in the world? Laura sighed again, but this time she didn't argue. I turned and walked away, heading home. The next morning I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. I'll take the alternate option you mentioned, I said. We'll go all in, I want full custody of my daughters. No compromise. There was a pause. Then my lawyer responded simply. All right. I'll start working on it. I'll call you once it's filed. That was all he said. 5 days later I had already made my move. In the meantime I had sent the evidence, the photos, the messages, everything, to every single family member, every friend, every mutual acquaintance. Heather had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And now everyone was going to know it. I don't approve of your actions. It seems to me like you were more interested in tarnishing your wife's reputation than seeking justice, Judge Carlson remarked, his expression unreadable. I sat there in silence, gripping the edge of the table. Do you have anything to say for yourself, Mr. Thompson? I took a slow breath before responding. I just wanted the world to know the truth, Your Honor. I hope exposing the truth isn't considered a crime. The judge let out a sharp exhale. No, but deliberately spreading images of people engaged in intimacy, even blurred ones, is a serious matter, he sneered. I met his gaze, unflinching. All the images I shared were edited to ensure no one was exposed inappropriately. They served only to confirm the betrayal, nothing more. The courtroom was silent for a moment before Judge Carlson shook his head and moved on. As I sat there, listening to the proceedings, a strange realization settled over me. I didn't feel the same burning anger toward Heather anymore, not like before. But that didn't mean I wanted anything to do with her. After everything that had happened, I couldn't imagine sitting across from her, making small talk, pretending things were normal for the sake of the girls. I didn't hate her anymore. But I didn't trust her either. And for that reason, I decided it was best, for me, for my daughters, that I kept my distance. The courtroom battle dragged on for weeks. I fought for full custody of my daughters, and Heather fought back, though not as aggressively as I had expected. Maybe she felt guilty. Maybe she just wanted to move on. In the end, the judge ruled in favor of shared custody. It wasn't the victory I had wanted, but at least I knew my daughters would always have me in their lives. After the dust settled, Heather tried reaching out a few times. Not to rekindle anything, she knew that was impossible, but to smooth things over, to find some common ground for the sake of the girls. I kept my responses short and to the point. I was civil when necessary, but I didn't go out of my way to make things easy for her. She had made her choice. She had broken something that couldn't be fixed. As for Alan Johnson, their relationship didn't last long. Laura had been right. It was only a matter of time before Heather realized exactly what kind of man he was. Less than a year later, I heard through the grapevine that she had ended things. I didn't ask for details. I didn't care. The hardest part was watching my daughters struggle to adjust. I did my best to shield them from the worst of it, but kids are smarter than we give them credit for. They knew things would never be the same. They felt the tension, the shift in our family. And that hurt more than anything else. But time passed. Life moved on. Eventually the anger faded. It didn't disappear completely, but it lost its edge. I stopped replaying every betrayal in my mind, stopped imagining all the things I should have done differently. One day I woke up and realized that I didn't feel the same crushing weight in my chest anymore. Laura, true to form, pushed me back into the world. She forced me to start living again, to see my divorce not as an ending, but as a new beginning. And maybe she was right. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll ever trust someone enough to let them into my life again. But I do know one thing. I survived. And for now that's enough.